We hear the word violence, but if you think about it, consider pesticides. Farmers may spray pesticides on fields to control bugs or funguses. And they don't say, well, we're committing violence against certain bugs or funguses. But the effects upon the bugs, for instance, is quite non-optimal to the bugs. Let's just put it that way. But we don't refer to the effect as violence upon the bugs. It's simply one force imposed upon another, or one thing having a sway upon another, whatever you want to frame it as. Now, in the human sphere, when we talk of violence, I think I ponder it most in two areas: physical, negative impacts, let's just put it that way, or impacts upon what you might call our view upon ourselves, which can be also very painful. You might call it negative impacts upon our self-esteem, how we view ourselves. And in turn, consider a couple of things here. For instance, subject to refinement. We hate feeling shame, and we hate feeling false guilt, I think. And there are various people, by the way, off the top of my head, who talk of false guilt, perhaps Paul Tillich, the theologian, and Rollo May, the Christian psychoanalyst. Interesting. Yes, the Christian psychoanalyst. He attended, if I remember correctly, a Christian seminary, which is quite unusual in this regard, as per being a psychoanalyst. Now, Abraham Maslow has talked about self-esteem as a more rarefied thing for us to be considered about, or whatever, as opposed to, say, our physiological needs. And yet I see a clash here that I want to investigate more in time, because many people have gone to war voluntarily, you might call it, or challenged people who do a duel knowing they might die themselves, for what you might call their honor, for having suffered so-called insults, for basically incurring a feeling of shame, or else perhaps false guilt, but I think especially the shame element, subject to more clarification by myself and others. So, this kind of a feeling of pain, you might call it shame pain, must be pretty profound if people are willing to die to ameliorate it, to solve it. And I'm talking then as per theories, say, from Dr. Nathaniel Branden, philosopher, psychologist. I'm not sure which more as per his classroom experiences. Next, we've heard some people say how important it is not to react. But I don't know that I've heard very many people at all, except perhaps Dr. Taraban, clarifying this along the lines, I think, lately, of reacting being in two kinds. For instance, Dr. Ramani has talked of baiting and how important it is not to react in terms of somebody, quote-unquote, getting a rise out of you, in terms of you reacting with anger. Well, that's one form of reacting, perhaps, but consider bears, like a mama bear. If their cubs are threatened, their lives threatened, the mama bear will react in what you might call angry fashion. to defend the bears, but the bear did not utter a word. So there must be, in my mind, also then a basic type of reacting not involving aggression of a snarling sort, perhaps, or a physically threatening sort. But again, just as there being two forms of what I call toxicity or violence, some might say, I don't prefer that word, because I don't want to apply that word to, say, the effects of DDT upon plants and funguses, or bugs again. But if there's two forms of that kind of impact negatively, why can't there be two forms of impact then when we're talking about reactivity? If Dr. Ramani says, don't take the bait and react, with anger, well, can't there be a reacting involving how you treat someone back by way of impacting their self-esteem, not something physical in nature, for instance? For you can smile and have a gentle manner, so to speak, and yet use words that are very harmfully impactful to someone else's self-esteem. Again, I think this kind of reactivity was not talked of adequately by Dr. Ramani, nor an individual I used to hear talking on trauma, so to speak. Somebody talking on YouTube channel, they might have had the name The Crappy Princess Fairy. I think, again, Dr. Taraban might have addressed this more, the reactivity of this sort involving impact upon self-esteem, although I don't know he used the exact word self-esteem. But we do know from hearing videos that words can sting, words can hurt. And they don't hurt in terms of slapping someone upside the head, so they must hurt in terms of impact upon self-esteem, as I now clarify the situation to be. Hence, one person whose course I bought on Udemy regarding alternative healing said, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will effing kill me," as per the negative effects upon self-esteem, I would say, versus one's body. The physical aspect and the pain preceding such, moreover. I think this has been tried to be addressed in one form, shape, or another to varying degrees of success in various movies and scriptures of various faiths. For instance, the Christian faith says, turn the other cheek. And the movie To Sir with Love has addressed this, I believe, with, in my mind, a somewhat questioning level of success, whereupon students of Sidney Poitier, playing a role in the movie To Sir with Love as a teacher, were commenting to the effect that he did not give back to them what they were giving to him. And what were they giving to him? You might say disrespect or impact, or attempts to, upon his self-esteem, trying to lower it. And while you would see in the movie he did sometimes blow his top, yes, like a mama bear toward a threat to her cubs particularly, was that necessarily a reactivity involving trying to get someone else or anything else to feel a negative sense of self-esteem or a lowering of self-esteem? I'm not sure that the movie always portrayed, through the use of the words and the acting of it, total non-use of downputting of self-esteem, but the students were portrayed as being quite impressed that this was not supposedly happening. A reactivity in kind through downputting or self-esteem lowering, shall we say, in kind as a defensive measure. And I'm not talking then an offensive measure, but even a defensive measure. For consider, too, some might say, well, you have a right to defend yourself by whatever means possible and needed, but I think in this case, then this can go tit and tat, round and round and round. And Gandhi, for instance, believed in nonviolence, but I think what he might have been trying to practice or get at with varying degrees of success as to clarity is nonviolence in terms of non-reacting, non-use of the tool of disrespect or down-putting of self-esteem, or just putting down, so to speak, of someone else. I'm not sure there was a clarification adequate enough in Gandhi's mind or conveyed to us of the difference between physical violence. Thus, if you wanted to use that term, I don't prefer it. Physical negative impact is what I would say, moreover, versus self-esteem negative impact. Let's just put it that way. A bunch of words, but I like it better that way right now. So, all of this amounting then to, again, turn the other cheek in terms of perhaps turn not to the use of negatively impacting someone's self-esteem as a weapon, even in defense. Because the ultimate belief, I believe in my mind now, is that this is going to go round and round and round. It's not going to be an effective tool. I mean, we've even heard the phrase, they gave as good as they got. But I think in the long run, if we're talking about that in terms of what seems to be the case, giving back disrespect with more disrespect, or downputting of self-esteem with downputting counteractingly, well, that doesn't seem to solve the problem in the long run. There has to be another way. Optimally, that is, for those most skilled in using it. If skilled. And so I present several minutes of audio here from a video by a person in Germany who has a YouTube channel called Sehnend, or Sehnend, Sehnend. I think it's quite profound. The person talks of how one can theoretically impact someone without saying a word. And I would say, based upon my life and experiences and thinking lately, that a prime way of this happening is by not reacting, and not necessarily in terms of not reacting like a mama bear might when cornered, or, moreover, one's cubs cornered, but not reacting in terms of giving back disrespect, so to speak, negative impacts of a self-esteem nature, using one's words. And sometimes, of course, nonverbal communications too, but the words stick the longest in memory, not the nonverbal communications, because the nonverbal communications aren't encoded in words, so can't be reviewed in one's minds and are forgotten more quickly. So the use of actual words that pull down someone else's self-esteem and can't easily be decoded thus as such, because we don't really get to the bottom of such so easily at all, decoding these words, especially when no adequate words of a respectful nature are typically to be found in various languages, I believe. So the upshot being, this individual is talking of a way of influencing people without words. And I would say, thus, without giving in kind to what one got of a disrespect nature, of a downputting of self-esteem nature. Tit for tat, shall we say. Just exactly like the scriptures in Christianity talked of turn the other cheek, I think in a way this could be in part referring to. And so I will play, perhaps in a minute here, in an appendage, a few sentences or a few minutes worth as per this one individual talking. And she mentions Atkinson and some of the matters there involved. I'm not so adhering to or see great clarity on sometimes, but I think the general shift here is quite impactful, that there is a way to profoundly influence somebody, in the rare individual who doesn't react in terms of putting someone else down, or I might say too, who doesn't react by isolating. For what good can you have upon anyone or anything if you isolate? So that's what my viewpoint is on this then, and I may play here as an appendage the first few minutes of the video and provide the exact link and title of the video also. It struck me quite to accord.